Hi everyone, welcome back to another project tutorial video. In this tutorial, we are going to be building a scalable notes application, and for building this notes application, we are going to be using React for frontend and Node.js for our backend, and we are going to be using a lot of AWS services, like starting from our authentication, we are going to be using AWS Cognito, and for database storage and database reading, we are going to be using a highly scalable database, that is AWS DynamoDB, and we are going to be using all of them to build this notes application. The notes application that we are going to be building will have all the features, like we can create new note, read all the notes for the specific user, update note or delete note, and we are going to be also adding an additional feature, like we can also make a note publicly shareable so that anyone without authentication can access the note that has been shared by the user. So let's start working on it. Now, here I am inside VS Code. First, we are going to be writing our React web application. For this, we'll open the terminal. First, we need to make sure that node npm and pnpm are installed in our system. We can simply run node ---- version to verify node is installed in our system, and npm ---- version. npm is also installed in our system, and next is pnpm. You can just add pnpm ---- version. Pnpm is the package manager, so pnpm is not installed in our system. We can simply run npm install -g pnpm, and now pnpm is installed in our system. We can simply type pnpm ---- version now. Now it's showing that we have pnpm installed. For creating React application, we are going to be using Vite. For this, we need to simply type this command pnpm create Vite. Just paste this command, and here we need to name our project. For this, we are going to be naming this as Notes App React. For framework, we are going to be choosing React, and we'll be using JavaScript only. For that, I'm selecting JavaScript. Now we need to navigate to this folder, then type pnpm install. It will take some time to download the packages. If you have already downloaded the packages, then it will simply reuse that package. That's the benefit of using pnpm. Now, as you can see that we have written the basic React starter file. Now we can simply type pnpm dev. It's running on localhost 5173. Just copy this port and let's open this. Here it is showing the basic React counter web application. We also need to add Daisy UI. For this, inside src folder, we'll be deleting the basic CSS that it's already having. And here we'll be creating one more file inside src folder. This will be styles.css, where we are going to be writing our custom CSS that is going to be applied globally inside our application. Now for our UI, we are going to be using Daisy UI as well as Tailwind CSS. For this, we can simply open one more terminal and open the Notes React folder and type pnpm add -d, and it will be Daisy UI. Now Daisy UI will be added inside our dev dependencies. Now we'll be also requiring Tailwind CSS. For this, I'm going to be using Tailwind CSS version 4. For this, we are going to be using Tailwind CSS 4.1. Now we have installed all the packages that we need. Here inside our styles.css, we need to import Tailwind CSS and plug in Daisy UI, and inside viteconfig.js, here we need to also import Tailwind CSS from Tailwind Vite, and inside plugins, we need to also add Tailwind CSS. Now here, if we look at our website, here it's saying failed to import index.css. It will no longer be index.css because it will be named as styles.css. Here we also don't need app.css. You can simply remove this. Now we have this UI, but no worries, we'll be designing our custom UI. For this, first we'll be creating a new folder. It will be our components folder. Inside components, we'll be first creating our landing page. So let's name it as landing page.tsx. Here we'll simply use RFC. And inside our app.jsx, we'll remove this default code and import landing page and display that here for now. and now it's just looking like this. To verify whether Tailwind CSS is working or not, inside landing page we'll write something like .bg red 500 h20 text excel hello font bold. Now as you can see that Tailwind CSS is installed properly and it's also working. We need to start by writing our landing page UI. Here we are not going to be writing a very advanced UI, only a very simple UI that is going to be required for application. Here inside the public folder I have also added a nodes.png file. We'll be using this logo inside our application. Now inside our landing page.tsx, here we will start writing our basic UI, base 200 color flex item center justify center. Then we'll be using hero base 100 p5 shadow excel. It will something look like. Then we will be adding hero content text center. Then we'll start by adding max width medium, max width MD, and then we can start adding our image of class name h36 with 36 mx auto and margin bottom of 4, and then we'll add the text as notes app that will have class name text 5xl and font bold, and then we can simply add some description, add some padding in y direction 6. Then we'll be using flex cap 4 justify center to center our content. Here we are going to be having two buttons. First one will be BTN primary for sign in, and then we'll have one more button. This will be for BTN outline for sign up. And this is how we created our basic landing page for our notes application. Remember that all these classes are not from Tailwind CSS itself. Some like base 200, button primary and button outline are coming from Daisy UI. If you want to know more about this, you can simply go to Daisy UI documentation. Now we have designed our basic landing page for our notes application, and inside our app we are also calling the landing page. Let's remove this count, we don't need it. Now we need to design our home page. Let's name the home page as notespage.tsx. Simply type RAFCE, and here also we'll be writing some basic UI inside our app.jsx. Now we'll be importing notes page, and instead of landing page we'll be showing our notes page. So here we have not written anything, so it's showing this error. Let's start with the UI. First, here we'll be having the class name of container mx auto for aligning to the center, and then max width is set to 6xl. 6xl is somewhat like 1152px, and then we'll be having our navbar and margin bottoms of 6. Then we'll be using flex 1 and flex justify between to have space between, and display will be flex, and flex 1 is going to be taking the most amount of width. Then we'll be using flex and flex row items to center. Then we'll be having our navbar item. First will be our logo. This is going to be an image for notes.png. Alt tag will be notes logo, and width of 10 and height of 10. Here it's like this, and then we are going to be having the text mx normal case text 2xl font bold my notes. This is something like this, and then we are going to be having a simple sign out button. For this we are having flex as none, and similar to our previous one, button that will have BTN and BTN outline like sign out. And now we have created our simple homepage nav bar. It's something like this. Now we have just got the basic UI for our notes web application. Now let's us integrate with AWS Cognito so that we can authenticate our users in our notes application. Here I am inside AWS console. In my previous tutorial, I had already shown how to use Cognito inside your React application. For this, we'll be using the similar approach only. First, inside the search box, we'll search for Cognito, select the first option, and you can choose any region depending upon your choice and your need. For this, I'm selecting Mumbai, AP South 1, and simply just click here, get started for free, less than 5 minutes. Here, our notes application is a single page application. For this, we'll be selecting this, and our name of our application is notes application. For sign in, we'll just use email username option. We'll be requiring email and name. and prefer username. All these things are enough. And then we need to add our return URL. For this, we are not publishing our website for now. For this, we can simply add a localhost 5173. Just simply copy and paste it. And then we can simply create user directory. Now first we'll be requiring these two packages, OIDC client TX, React OIDC context. Simply copy this. Now since we are using PNPM, we'll be adding PNPM, install OIDC client TX, React OIDC context, --save to save inside dev dependencies. Now we have installed these two packages. Next, we'll not copy the full UI. Instead, we'll copy some part. For now, I'm just clicking on Go to Overview. Here, inside our app client, Notes application, inside login pages, we need to edit it. We need to also add our sign out URL. The sign out URL will be similar to our login URL. And inside OpenID Connect Scope, we need to also select AWS Cognito sign-in user.admin and save changes. This is required for JWT validation inside our backend. And now inside Quick Start Guide, we can simply copy this Cognito config. And one thing to note, this things will not be TSX since we are coding in JSX. So it will be JSX. And now we have passed the Cognito config. Now we need to simply import the auth provider and we need to wrap our application with auth provider. Here we need to also pass the Cognito config. So now this auth provider that we have applied above our application, it means that this auth provider can be accessed anywhere inside our application. For this, first we'll be linking that inside our landing page where we have our sign up and sign in UI. So we'll remove this React and instead we'll call use auth from React OIDC context. And here we can create a const auth variable and we'll use auth. When the user clicks on this button, we'll call auth.read sign in with redirect. So now inside our app.jsx, we'll disable this notes page and instead we'll have the landing page. Let's try to sign in. It's taking us to the AWS login page. Let's check it again. Here we have our notes page. When we click on sign in, it's taking us to the AWS sign in page. Now also for our sign up, we need to do the same thing. Like on click, we'll have a function, but this time we'll find that we don't have any option for auth.signup. We only have the option for sign out. So for this, what we can do, here we can simply click on create an account. Let's copy this full URL and when the user clicks on sign up, we'll use window.location.href to change our location window to this URL. Now let's go back inside our localhost 5173. Now let's try to click on sign up. Let's try to click on sign up. It's taking us to the sign up page very easily. And then sign in, it's taking us to the sign in page. Now we have done the sign in and sign up page. Now we have linked Cognito Authentication for email password method inside our React application. For this case, we are only going to using this. And now let's write some logic. If the user is authenticated, in that case, it should be loading as the notes page. Else it's going to be loading the landing page. So those logic we are going to be writing here. First, here we need to also import use auth from React OIDC context. And here we'll create a const auth variable called use auth. Now here we need to write the logic. If auth.is loading, in that case we'll be showing simple text like loading ... If auth.is error, in that case we'll be loading another paragraph tag that's error and the auth.error. And then if auth.is authenticated, only in that case we'll be showing the notes page. And else another case, if And only in other cases, if auth dot is not authenticated and auth dot no error and auth dot not is loading, in that case we'll show this landing page. So now we have written the logic, like if it's loading, it will show the loading text. If we are having any error in authentication, it will show the error. If you're authenticated, we'll be taking the user to notes page, else we'll be taking the user to landing page. It's very simple. Now let's try to create a new account by clicking sign up here. Let's name it as test user 1. Preferred username, let's also keep it as same. Email address, let's keep any email address, name as test user number 1. Let's add some password. Let's click on sign up. Here it has sent a verification code. Enter the verification code. Confirm account. And now, as you can see, it just showed the loading text and then it just redirected us to the home page. But if we try to refresh, here it does not show. Here we get some error. It's not an error, like if we click on inspect, go to storage, local storage, you'll find that the user data, you'll find the user JWT access token, all are saved here. That means it's getting stored, but it's not working when it's on this query code. It only works for one time, then we need to redirect the user back to localhost 5173. Only in that case it should work. Now let's work on the sign out function. First, this node page is expected to receive the auth. For this, we'll just pass the auth. Now we can do that simply inside our app.jsx. We'll pass the auth as auth. This auth, if user is authenticated, then we are going to be passing the full auth variable inside our notes page, and notes page will have full access to our auth. For the sign out function, again we need to visit the quick start guide. Here you will find that we have the option for sign out with redirect. We need to copy this, and here we need to just paste this function. It's sign out with redirect. It's having our client ID, logout URI, our Cognito domain. Do one more thing, like before changing our window location, we can just call auth.remove user. This remove user is coming from this auth variable. And now when we click on this sign out button, we'll call on click and we'll call the function sign out with sign out redirect. Let's try to check this. If we try to sign out, it's taking us to the notes application. If we try to refresh, then also it's taking us to. Now what we can do for our loading screen, we can just add some React loaders. Like we can add some React spinners, like let's say bounce loader we want to add. In that case, we need to first use pnpm add React spinners. And now we need to just call this bounce loader, import bounce loader from React spinners, and then here we can call bounce loader. Now let's try to reload this. We saw that the loading screen is coming in the top. To fix this, we need to just center this. Now for making this bounce loader in center, what we can do, we can just wrap this with a div of w screen. Height will be also for screen, flex, item center, justify center, and also we can change the color to blue. Now if we try to refresh, let's click on sign in, you can see the blue loading screen. Now let's try to sign in. Let's use this user 1, enter the password. Now it's a beautiful loading screen. Now we can start working with our notes page. But one thing that first we should like to do, that when we get redirected to this code/code route, when we get redirected to this root route with this code query, we want them to redirect back to localhost 5173, otherwise it will give some error. For this, we need to just use window location href logic to redirect back to the root route after authentication is done. So here first we'll not use state. Here we'll remove this use state. Instead we'll use effect. Here we'll start writing the logic. After successful authentication, we are going to be removing the query code or state. Here we'll use effect. And then if user is not authenticated, then nothing to do. If user is authenticated, in that case, we'll create a const param variable and we'll use urls.search params. It means that it's going to be search the query params that the user currently is inside. And then if query params has code or query params dot has state, in that case we'll just use window.history.replace state and pass empty JSON document title and redirect to our root location, and our dependency will be only on all.authenticated. So if it's authenticated, it's only going to be calling the function only if either the user is authenticated or not authenticated. Now this will fix our issue. Like, let's try to log out again. And let's again try to sign in. Test user 1. Let's enter our password, click on continue. So now you can see that we directly got redirected to our localhost 5173, our root route. Now after we were authenticated from AWS Cognito, it redirected us to localhost 5173 with some code in query. But after we got the code, we just changed the window location to our root route so that we don't have any problem. Now we are done with the authentication part. Now let's work on the notes page. We'll learn how we can create, read, update, delete notes inside our notes page. For this, first let's have a basic UI inside our notes page.jsx. Here we are having the nav bar, so we'll skip this. After the nav bar, we'll have one more button. Now before creating the button, we need some icons. For adding icons, we'll simply use pnpm add lucid react to add lucid react package so that we can add some icons. Like in this case, we'll import plus icon from lucid react, and here we'll be having a button. Here we'll have the plus symbol. Now the plus is visible, but we need to add some CSS logic so that we can make it in the bottom right so that it looks like some floating action button. Let's add a class name like btn, btn primary, btn lg, rounded lg, fixed, bottom 10, right 10, and shadow large. Now it's looking something like this. Let's also increase the size of this button. Let's make it 24. And now we can add some text like new note. Now it's okay. It's looking like some floating action button. Now we need to deal with our database. For database, we are going to be using DynamoDB. For this, first, here inside our AWS console, we need to search for DynamoDB. Inside DynamoDB, we'll simply click on create table. Here we'll name the table as user underscore notes. Partition key will be our note ID. We don't need any short key. For this, we can just keep the default option. Like we can also add some tag like notes for users. Now it will take some time to create a table. We are creating the table inside AP South 1 Mumbai. Now it has created our table. So this is how a table works. It's on-demand capacity mode. Currently we can read 12,000 units per second, and write is around 4,000 operations per second. And it also has a all-time free tier, so you don't need to worry about exceeding the free tier. Now we need to start working with our backend. So for this, here we'll be creating one more folder. It will be notes app backend. Here open another terminal, visit notes app backend. First we'll initialize the folder. We just created a package.json. Now here we'll be importing some packages. Let's add those packages. First we'll be requiring CORS, Express, AWS, libDynamoDB, AWS, Client Cognito Identity Provider, and AWS Client DynamoDB. So all this package we need to install. Just use pnpm add. Now all these packages are now installed. We need to start writing our backend. For this, we'll create a new file. It will be our index.js file. First, we need to import the packages like express from express, import const from const, then const app will be express, const port. We are setting the port as 3000. You can choose any port that according to your wish. Now we'll use app.use course and app.use express JSON, and then we'll just use app.listen, parse port, and the function console.log servers running on this port. Now we can simply call node index.js. Now we need to also set the type as module, otherwise it will not work. So here inside package.json, set the type as module, and now just stop the function and type node index.js. Now it's running on port 3000. Here we can also create a .get ignore file so that it ignores node modules folder. Inside our nodes app backend, we'll create one more folder for our controllers and one more folder will be for our routes. Here we'll be creating nodes routes.js. We'll just use import express from express, const router is equal to express.router, and then we can just use router.get root route. We'll get request response and just return rest.send. Hello, server is working. For now we are just sending this. Then we can just export default router, and we can import nodes route from /routes/nodes route.js, and here we can use app.use/nodes. We call the nodes routes. Now if we try to access localhost 3000/nodes, here we are getting cannot get /nodes because we are running it using node, so we are getting this error. Let's use nodemon so that it can automatically refresh our server when it gets any changes. Now let's try to refresh. It's saying hello, server is working. It means that we have set the routes correctly. Now inside our controllers, we'll start writing all the logic to communicate between our front-end application and our database, that's DynamoDB. But before that, we need to create one more folder. This will be our config folder. Here first we'll write cognito.js and also dynamo.js. Here first we need to import Cognito Identity Provider Client from AWS SDK Client Cognito Identity Provider. Then we need to specify our region. In my case, the region was AP South 1, Mumbai, as you can see. So I have selected this region, and then we'll just create a variable new Cognito Identity Provider Client and provide the region. And now we'll export this client so that we can use it anywhere inside our backend application. Similar to this, we'll also create a Dynamo client. We'll import DynamoDB client from AWS SDK client DynamoDB, and then we'll specify the region as AP South 1. Then Dynamo client will be new Dynamo client, and we need to provide the region, and then we need to simply export Dynamo client. Now here, I don't need to add any extra credentials because the credentials are going to be applied from AWS CLI. Like if I run AWS STS get caller identity, then in that case, it will show that I'm currently logged in with dev user, and the dev user account has the access to read or write in DynamoDB. But in your case, if you don't have AWS CLI installed in your system, or you are getting something difficult, in that case, what you can do, you can just watch my AWS CLI tutorial video. I mentioned how to create new account using IAM and allow the permissions that are required for that account. And then you can just connect that account with your machine. Now, if you don't want to use AWS CLI to pass your credentials, you can do one more step. Like after a region, you can just pass the credentials. Here you are passing the access key ID and the secret key ID. This option is not so secure. Like if somebody have access to your secret key and access key, then they can access anything inside your AWS. So I really don't prefer this option. But if you don't have CLI and want to quickly use, in that case you should be using. But I'm not going to using this. I'll keep this default because the access key and secret key will be passed automatically. I don't need to worry about that from AWS CLI. Now with this, we can talk with our AWS Dynamo and Cognito from our backend. First, let's work on the middleware part. So here we'll create one more folder. It will be for middleware. Here we'll create one more file. Here we'll write a file auth.js. Here first we'll call get user command from AWS client Cognito identity provider, then Cognito client that we have written, and then we'll just create a function authenticate token. Here first we'll check the auth header authorization, and then we'll try to extract the token that we sent. We have already done this inside our previous tutorial where we have learned how to integrate AWS Cognito, and then if token is not found, then we'll just reply that access token is required to access this endpoint. Then we'll use try catch. First, we'll create a const command. We'll call get user command, pass our access token. It will verify whether the token is correct or not. If it's correct, in that case, we'll get us some result from Cognito client. We'll store that result and then we'll extract the user attributes and we'll pass that using request.user. We'll pass all that attributes and then we'll pass the next callback function that we are passing to this authenticate function. Then we can simply call token verification failed in case of error and return token either invalid or expired. And we have written the Auth Middleware logic. Here, what we can do now, let's try to import authenticate token. And now we can just pass authenticate token. In this case, we'll be requiring the access key. So it was auth.js. Now if we try to refresh, we'll find that error access token is required to access this endpoint. Now let's start to write the logic inside node controllers.js. Now first here we'll be requiring this packages like AWS SDK, lib dynamo and our dynamo client that we have written and random UID from crypto for creating unique IDs. First we'll write the function to create a new node. Create new node. Here first we'll create a function create node where we are going to be passing the request and response. First we'll wrap it inside try catch. Then we'll get the node and whether it's public or not from our request.body, means the front end is going to pass this, and then we'll get the client ID from request.user. First we are going to be using the authenticate token middleware. From there inside attributes we are going to be getting that user ID, and then we'll create a random node ID using random UID from crypto, and then we'll get the current time from datetime.to ISO string. And since we are going to be allowing the option to share the URL, for that if it's public, if user is sending that the node is public, in that case we'll just assign a share URL, else we'll set it to null. Now it's an important part. Here we need to write the data. So the data that we are going to be writing is client ID, node save time, last did that, public is public or not, and the share URL. Now the node ID was our primary key, so this is compulsory and this should be there. And then these are our data that we are going to be writing inside our DynamoDB. Then we'll just create a command. This will be put command. Means it's just the Dynamo command to write data inside the database. Here we need to pass our table name. Our table name was using nodes, this one. And then we need to pass our item. This will be our nodes item. And then simply we can just call dynamo client.send. And now we can simply add response.status to 01 node created successfully in the node. In case of error, we'll just send that fail to create node. And this config will be dynamo.js. Now it's correct. So now we have written the function, but client ID will not be directly accessed using request.user. So what we can do in our auth.js, here we'll pass client ID. It will be from attribute.sub This is the subscription ID, the unique ID for the user. When they are signing in AWS Cognito, it's automatically generated. And now inside our node routes, here first we need to import create node from nodescontroller.js, and here we'll have the endpoint to create new node. It will be router.post to our root route. User need to be authenticated, so we are adding authenticate middleware. Then we'll get request and response, and then we can just call create node. Now let us try to call this create node function from our front end. For this, we need to make some UI so that the user is able to write some node. What we want, when the user click on this new node button, it should give a pop-up to create new node. For this, inside our nodes React application src components nodes page, here we need to write the logic. Like here we'll be needing packages like useState, useEffect, callback, and useRef. Here first we'll have some hooks like nodes, we'll set it to empty list, current node, set current node, we'll just select it to empty string, and then is modal open and set as modal open, we'll set it to false by default. Then node to delete, set node to delete, we'll set it to null, node to edit, set node to edit, we'll set it to null, node to view, we'll set it to null, and then whether it's public or not. Now here it was for our sign out. We need to also write the function to open the modal when we click on this new node button. Let's write that here. We'll just create a function open modal for new, and here we'll just set node to edit as null because we are not editing, but current node will be to empty string and is public to false by default, and set modal is open to true so that we can know whether the modal is open or not. And if we trigger this function, it means that we are opening this model. And when we click this new node button, we can call this open for new model. Like here inside our button, we'll have the onClick function. We can call open model for new. Now we need to also display the UI. Here we'll be using this as modal open because we are setting the modal open as true. It means that if it's open, in that case we should show that UI. Now below the new node button, we'll write the logic. Our model is open, like we'll start writing from here. If our model is open, in that case, first here we'll have a div of class model and model open. These are coming from DZ UI, and then inside we'll be having a class name of model box div, and then we'll have an h3 header element of font bold and text large. Here we are storing inside node to edit that if it's node to edit, in that case here will display edit node, else will show add new node. Let's test it. Like if we click here, it's showing us add new node. Now then we'll be having a text area of class name text area bordered with full, margin top 4 and height of 43, and font I'm choosing this KVAT. We'll add that later on. For now, just adding this, and the value will be the current node that we are having. We are setting it here like this. Currently when the user start to create node, the default node will be empty, so we are setting empty string, and when they type something on changed, we'll change the node to what they are typing. So for that we are using this set current node hook. Like if we type something, here we are getting it. Now we need to also have a cancel button so that we can get out of this model or close this model. Before that, we need to write some code for closing our model. Close model will be very simple to this one. Here it will be close model, and is set as model open will be false because we are closing it. We need to set that to false. And here inside our model we'll have a close button. First let's add a div of class name model action. Here we'll have a button of class btn, and here when the user click this cancel button, currently we don't have anything. When the user clicks on the cancel button, we'll just call the close model function. It will trigger, it will change the state of is model to false. Like if we click on cancel, it just disappear. Now you can see that how it's working. Now here we'll be having one more button. It will be for saving the node. For this, similar to our previous one, it will be button primary, and if it's node to edit, in that case we'll be setting as save changes. Otherwise we'll make the text as add node like this. Here we are getting the option of add node. Currently we don't have any functionality because we need to write the function to add the new node here. Now we need to call our backend for saving the node. Here we have created nodes route, and if you post on /root route, if you post on /nodes route, means this route, then we need to pass our access key so that we can verify the Cognito user, and then we'll give the option to create node. So we need to call this endpoint, but we need to also pass the authorization JWT access token to verify whether we are authenticated or not. Let's write the function. Here I'm creating a function handle save node. If the current node does not have anything, in that case it will simply return do nothing. Else we will select the method as post. As here in nodes route we need to post to this endpoint. Then we'll set the URL as localhost 3000 because we are running it locally /nodes the route, and then we'll be using try catch. First we'll fetch the URL, pass the method as post like this, and then we'll pass our header content type application JSON, and authorization will be our bearer user auth.user.access token. This auth we are passing to this nodes page function, and then we'll pass the body where we'll be having json.stringify our current node and whether the node is public or not. And if response is okay, in that case we'll be closing the model, else we'll just print inside the console that error on saving node. Now we need to call this function. We don't need to pass anything additional to this function because we are going to be getting the data from the hooks that we have created. Now when we press this save button or add node button, we'll call this function handle save node that we have written. Now this time we need to just inspect, check our network tab. First let's try to add a node. How are you? Now let's add this. Your options is working, but it got stuck in post. Let's find out what's the problem. Let's try to add some console.log. Let's print request.body and request.user. Here basically we don't need to pass request and response. All the strings will be handled automatically. Now let's again try to create the node. Here as you can see here we are getting the value. Let's now try to create a new node. This is a new node. Let's click on add. Here it just closed the model. It means that the node got created. Let's try to explore items. Here we are having two nodes that we have created. First one was hello, and this is a new node, and this public is set to false. Now with this we can say that we are able to create new node. We can also print a console log here that node got created, and now this was the function to create a new node. Now we need to write the function to read all the nodes that are created by this user. Now here we are able to create the node. Let's do one more thing. In our UI, inside the nodes page, in our UI, when we are creating a new node, we can simply add one more checkbox to tell whether you want to make this node public or not. Here between the text area and model action, you will have a div of class name, form control, margin top for 4, and then we'll have label and cursor pointer. Here we are going to be having this text, make the node public, shareable, and then we'll have our input checkbox. Class name will be checkbox primary, and then the checked option will be true or false depending upon is public variable that we are setting using useState. And then in case of change, we'll just call this set is public to our target that's checked or not, either true or false. Now you can see that we can either check this or uncheck this. Let's try to make a note like this is our public note. Let's click on shareable. Now let's add this note. Your notes got added and we are getting this response, note created successfully. Also we are getting note got created. This was the note and as public is set to true. Let's also check our database. Here this time we are getting as public is set to true and we are also getting the share URL. Now we need to work on reading all the notes that are created by the current user. Here currently we are not showing anything, so we need to have some endpoint that we are going to call to read all the notes that we have for the specific client. But one thing we need to remember that if we have 5 to 10 notes, then reading all of them at once is not a big problem. But when we try to call several number of nodes directly in a single response, in that case, it may be expensive to read all the data. Instead, the better option will be to use pagination. And for using pagination inside DynamoDB, we need to use the exclusive start key property inside DynamoDB. It's like key-based pagination. Like at the end of the response, it gives the next page key that you need to start from. This is going to be a little bit difficult task, but no worries, we are going to do it. For now, we don't need this root route. We can simply remove this. And inside our nodes controller, here we'll start writing the logic to read all our nodes that the current user has created. Now before reading our nodes, I need to tell something that we basically have two options, either to scan the whole table or query the specific part of the table. Now scan is more expensive than query, as scan just scan the full table, but query just access the specific table that we require. So for our use case, we are going to be using query because it's less expensive to read. But before reading in query, we need to create an index. Here inside our user nodes, we need to create an index. Here we don't have any index, just create an index. This index will be depending upon our client ID. We are going to be setting the partition key as client ID, and we need to also short our key. For our short key, we can just use last updated so that the recent node that we have created come first. Now simply scroll down and create an index. This will take some more time to create. Just wait until it gets created. So now our index is active. Let's start writing our backend function to read all the nodes created by the user using pagination. For this, we are going to be using exclusive start key. Here we are going to be having a get nodes function where we are going to be passing request and response. First we'll wrap this with try catch. Here first we'll try to get the client ID from request.user, and then we'll start the pagination step. Like from our front end, we need to pass the limit and the next key that will be base 64 encoded, where the key will be used as last evaluated key. And here first we'll limit to the minimum. Like here first we'll pass the limit that we are having. If it's not passed, then by default we'll set it to 12 and we'll convert this string to integer. So that means minimum of 12 and 50. So 12 will come from this here, and out of maximum 1 and 12. So this means that depending upon the limit, it will either fetch items between range 1 to 12. So this is how we have set our limit. Next, we are defining the exclusive start key as undefined. If we are passing the next key from our request.query, it will be in base 64. So we need to convert this to string. First we'll decode the base 64 next key to normal string, and then we'll set the start exclusive key to that JSON that we have decoded from our base 64. In case of any error, we'll just return invalid next key. We need to remember that when we get the next exclusive key from DynamoDB, it comes in JSON format and we can't share that directly. Instead, we need to convert that into base 64 from our backend and send to frontend. And frontend will send that base 64 key to fetch new items, and we'll decode it first and then send to search that data inside DynamoDB. And after our key part is done, we'll start writing our query command. As I told you, that query is less expensive to read than scan, and it will only query the specific items that we provide to query. Like first, we'll set the table name as our users table that we have, and index name will be the client ID last updated index that we have recently created, this one. And then the key condition will be when the client ID is equal to the client ID that we are passing. Here is the condition, this is the client ID, this is the query, and this will be the value that we are passing, and this client ID is coming from request.user, the current user who is sending the request, and then we'll have a scan index forward so that we get the newest item first, means in descending order, since we are sorting it using the last updated time. So the newest updated node will come first, and then we'll just set the limit as the limit that we pass, and next exclusive key, if we have any JSON key, we'll be passing that. Else we have this undefined will be passed, and then store the result. After we do dynamo client.send and pass our command, we'll get the result and we'll store inside a const result variable, and we'll prepare the response. Response will have all the nodes item. If we don't have any nodes item, we'll send empty list. And the next evaluated key, we need to make sure we can't send the JSON response directly. Instead, we need to encode it to base 64 first. For this, if we have result.last evaluated key, means the key to search for the next page item, then we'll be converting the last evaluated key to base 64 from JSON string. If we don't have, we will simply return null, and then the count will be result.items.length, and we'll simply use res.json to return this response to our front end or anywhere who is calling the endpoint. And in case of error, we'll just print error in fetching nodes and send the status 500 that failed to fetch nodes. So now we have written this function. Now we need to call this function from some route. For this, inside our nodes route, we'll have similar route to this, but this time we'll get all the nodes created by the current user. And the function name was getNodes. Here we'll call getNodes. Now we need to call this function. It will not be post because this one is post, so this one will be get. Now we need to call this get function from our front end. Here we need to write one more function to load all the nodes that are created by the user. Now we are already importing useState, useEffect, useCallback and useRef inside nodespage.jsx. Now we'll be requiring some more use states, like for pagination state we'll have next key, set next key that will set to null, is loading and set is loading that will be setting to false, and has more, set has more that will be setting to true, and we'll be having a loader ref. For this we'll set useRef to null, and then we'll be having the observer creation loops once we want to do the pagination when the user scrolls down. For this, we are creating a next key ref and is loading ref. For this, you need to just import useRef. We'll use all of this for pagination and loading the data. So here, we need to write the function to fetch nodes from our backend that we have written. Here we have written this route. When we send get request to /nodes, it will call the getNode function, and from here it will fetch the client ID automatically. We need to pass the limit and the next key in base 64 from our front end, and then it will read the table and return us the data. So for this, here after handle save node function, here we'll start writing the function const fetch node. For this, we are going to be using use callback. And then here it will be an async function. Append we are setting it to false by default, and use key we are setting it to null. And then we'll be wrapping it with try catch. And finally, first, if user does not have the access token, in that case we'll do nothing. And also if it's loading, we don't need to do anything. In that case, we need to set is loading ref.current to true and set is loading to true. And after that, we can start our try catch. First, we'll create a QS variable and pass the URL search params. As we have designed the function, we need to pass our limit and next key using query. So for that, when we are using this, then here we'll set query limit to 12. We only want to load maximum 12 number of nodes. And then if use key, then we'll set the next key as the key that we are passing to this function. And then we'll call our backend /nodes. We'll pass the query string that we are creating here, and we'll also pass the authorization. Then we'll get the data from response.json. We'll set our nodes. Now, if we have any previous data and we are appending that data, we'll just add the previous data plus the data that we are loading from our backend, else we'll simply return the data that we have or we'll return empty list. And next key, if data.next key is there, in that case we will just set the next key, and next key.current will set the data.next key that we are having. If we are not having anything, we'll set it to null. Whether the nodes that we are loading has more items or not, it can be decided. If data.next key is there, means our backend is returning a next key, it means that data is still there. For that reason, it's returning next key. Otherwise, DynamoDB would return null. If it's null, this boolean will set as false. And if there is some data, suppose the base 64 data, it will set as true. And in case of error, we'll just print error in fetching node. And finally, we'll just set the loading ref.current to false and set is loading to false. And here we'll be calling this when we have auth.user access token as dependency. So this was our fetch node function. Now we'll be calling this fetch node function inside use effect. So here we'll call the use effect function, and if our auth is authenticated and user auth.user.have access token, it means the user is authenticated and have an access token. In that case, we'll fetch the node. Means this function means we are going to be fetching all the nodes if user is authenticated. For the first time, we will not have any extra data and any next key. So append will be false and use key will be null, but we'll not be calling this every time. Instead, we'll have the dependencies like auth is authenticated, auth.user have access token, and we'll be also passing the fetch node. Only in these cases, the use effect function will call the fetch node and it will try to fetch the node from our backend, and we are also setting our nodes. It means that we can access our nodes variable, and when we load the nodes, we are also setting the nodes. It means that we can access the nodes from this variable that we are setting it using use state. Now we need to also have one more use effect, like to keep our refs sync with the state. For this, we'll just have a use effect to set next key.ref.current to our next key, and dependency will be our next key. And another use effect, this will be for is loading ref.current to set to is loading. It will be either true or false, and dependency will be also is loading. Now we need to simply display the nodes. After loading the data, we are saving the nodes using set node. Now those nodes are available inside the nodes variable. We can access that and display the user nodes. Let's do that. But before showing the nodes UI, let's try to check whether we are able to call our backend or not. Here, our backend is running. Our frontend is also running. Now let's sign into our account. Test user1. Enter our password. So it's calling the nodes, get all nodes endpoint, but here we are getting the error like failed to fetch node. It means it's a backend error. Let's try to check our backend. Here we are getting this error in fetching node, validation exception attributes values must not be empty. It means that we had done something wrong. Here we are having our expression values and we are passing the client ID. In this case, it might happen that the client ID is not passed correctly. Let's try to do console.log request.user, and let's again try to refresh this. Your client ID is coming as undefined, so that's wrong. So here the main problem is that here we are not getting the client ID and the client ID is not coming. Like we are trying to read the client ID from the attributes, but if you notice that the client ID is not inside attribute sub, but instead attributes are list, and inside attributes the fourth element is having the name as sub and the value. Here will basically have a reduce function that will reduce, it will loop over each of the attributes and get the name and the key. Here will be, we are creating a map where we are setting the object name is equal to value and we are returning that. By this, we'll be getting the data client ID inside attributes.sub. Now let's try to refresh. Here we are getting the client ID and the attributes correctly inside a single object like, and now here we are getting the response as 200, but currently we don't have any nodes because here we have not stored the nodes correctly. So for this, we need to delete all these nodes because here we have not stored the client ID. Now here we can try to refresh and then we can create our node. This is our new node. Let's add this node. Now node got created. It should also call the get nodes function. So here it just called and we didn't receive any nodes. Let's see, did it save? So here this time it saved. It's also stored the client ID. Now let's try to refresh this. This time in response, it's returning the node that we have created. Like the node was, this was our node ID, save time, and our client ID. So this endpoint to get all nodes is working. Let's try to create one more node. This is our second node. Let's make this as shareable. Let's click on add node. Now we are getting nodes created successfully. After we have created the nodes, we need to call the fetch node so that it fetches the node. So here inside our React nodes page, when we create new node, like we were creating nodes using save handle save node. After we have created the node, we are simply closing the model. But this time we'll do some more things, like first we'll set the key, next key as null and next keyref as next keyref dot current to null and has mode to true, so that it starts loading newer nodes. And then we'll just call fetch node and pass append false and use key as null so that it loads newer nodes. Now this time let's delete everything and let's try to create one more node. This is our third node. Let's try to create this node. We'll find that we first create our node. Here we got the response node got created, and then we call our get nodes function to load all our nodes. It means that the nodes are getting loaded, but we need to work on our UI to show the nodes to the user. So let's do that. So for this, inside our styles.css, we'll just import our Google font and then we'll write some simple classes for our note card and note. Here we are creating a class font kwart and we are passing the font family as kwart cursor, and then we are creating the UI for our note card, giving the class name as note-card. Background color, we are choosing something like yellow and adding border, box shadow, transition and transform. We are rotating the card -1 degree so that it gives a feel like some notes UI. Now we'll be also having a hover. When we hover, we'll transform it to 0 degree so that it hits to the normal mode, and we'll scale it a little bit bigger, and then we'll just have a simple box shadow. We'll be using this classes inside our nodes page. Now in our front-end React application, we are already loading the nodes and storing inside this nodes variable. Now our job is to only display this nodes to the user. Now here we are going to be creating our nodes UI. For this, between our navbar and the new button, here we'll have one more div. For this, we are going to be using the grid layout. For that, we are going to be using display as grid. First, we'll have grid class name, then grid column 1. For small, we'll have 2 columns. For medium, we'll have 3. And large, we'll have 4 columns. Gap will be 6 and margin bottom will be 20. Then for each node, we are going to map. Now for all the nodes, we are going to be mapping each node. Here, first we'll create one more div. The key will be node.id and class name will be card, node card and cursor pointer. Here we have written this custom CSS inside our styles.css. From that, we are going to be using this, and then we'll create a class name of card body. Here we'll have flex justify between, item start, margin 2, and then just use line clamp 3, flex grow, front keyword, and text to Excel. Here we'll have the node. It is something like this, and then we'll have whether it's public or not, a public batch like this. And then we'll have one more div. This will be for our card actions. For now, here we'll be only having the date when the note was created, like this. Now if we view it on big screen, it is looking something like this. And in small screen, it is looking something like this. It's quite okay. Now this is looking something like this. Here we have set line clamp as 3 so that we only take the first 3 lines. The rest are going to be overflow. Like if we say that we write very large text and try to create our note, here it will look something like this, like the part that our overflow is coming like this, ... So what we want to do, like when we click on this, it should reveal us the full note that we have written. For this, we need to do something else. Here, if we scroll up, we'll find that we already have a hook note to view and set note to view. When we click on this note, we want to set note to view to true so that we can view the full note that we are clicking on it. For this, we are going to be using another different UI. Like here we are getting the cursor pointer. So what we can do here, when we click on the specific note, that is this one, here we have cursor pointer. Here we are going to be targeting, like when we click here, on click, like first we'll check if note to view is there. In that case, we'll return a div of modal open, class name will have inner div of class name modal box, and then we'll have a h3 header. Font will be bold, text large, flex, item center, gap 2, and inside it we'll have one more batch. If note to view is public, in that case we'll be adding a batch of batch success and we'll have the text as public. Then we'll be showing all the note inside paragraph, white space prevab, font keyword, and text excel. Like this it will show. Now we don't have the cancel button. For this we'll be also having a div modal action, and here we'll be having a close button like this. When we click on this close button, we'll set note to view to null and the UI will disappear. So this is how we can view long note that we have like this. When you click here, it just close the note. Now it's working fine. We are having no problem. Now we can create new note and also read our notes. Now we need to work on the scroll movement to fetch extra additional note. We have not done that thing. First, we need to create some extra notes. For here, I'm just creating some random notes. Now I have created 12 notes. Now what I am going to start, when I try to add 13th note, this is our 13th note. Now as you can see that we only have 12 note, but this was our 13th note, and if we add one more note, you'll find that the last one will get disappear. See, the last node got disappeared, means the first and the second node got disappeared. This was our third node and 13, 14. It means only 12 nodes are getting loaded. Now what we want, when we scroll down using our mouse, we want to observe the mouse event and load other nodes that we are not loading. Like for pagination, we are only loading 12 nodes from descending last updated timestamp. So here we need to write that logic to load more nodes that we are having. Let's work on this first. Here we are going to be writing one more function. Let's write it here. Here we'll be having the function for handling infinite scroll to create a stable observer for handling our scroll changes. First, we are going to be using use effect. Here we will check if our loader ref is not current, means we are not in loading state. We will return it. We'll end the call. Else, we are creating a variable EL where we are storing the loader ref.current reference, and here we are creating an observer. For this, we'll be using interaction observer and we'll need to pass the entries. Like our first entry will be inside entry 0 if first interaction, if it's first dot intersecting and next ref is current and note loading dot current. In that case, we'll try to fetch the notes, and this time append will be true, and we will be having next key ref dot current. We are going to be passing that key ref inside use key, and then here in interaction observer we need to also pass the option. So this will be the option, like root will be null and root width margin will be 0 pixels and threshold will be 0, and then we'll just call observer.observe and our ref, and we'll pass our ref, and we'll just return observer.unobserve our ref. When we are done, it will have dependency on loader ref as well as fetch node, and we also need to write the window scroll fallback option. If it's near to the next page, then we need to load it again. So here also we'll use effect. Here we are creating a const variable on scroll. If our next key ref is current and is loading ref.current, in that case we'll simply close the function. Else we'll check the scroll position. It will be window.innerHeight plus scroll at window.scrollWide, and our document height, it will be inside document.body.offsetHeight, and then we need to check if the height difference is less than 400. In that case, we should be fetching nodes. If it's available, in that case, we'll just call fetch node, pass append true, and use key will be our next key ref.current. We'll just add window.event listener. Our event will be scroll, and listener will be the listener that we have created here, and the event will be passive to true, and then we'll just remove the event listener to close the listener. It will depend upon fetch nodes. So now we have done this. So now let's try to check our front end. Here we are getting some error. Let's try to check our console. Here we are getting that fetch node is, I think that we have declared fetch node in wrong position. Yes, so we have declared fetch node after we are using fetch node here. So for that we are getting this problem. Just copy this full fetch node function and we'll move it upwards like here, and now we'll not have any problem. Now as you can see, first it load all the 12 nodes, and then when we scroll down, it load our next two nodes like this. Here it load the next two nodes, and for this we just request localhost and then we passed our next key, and this way we are able to load all of our nodes that we have created. So now we have done with the function for reading our nodes. Let's work on the two parts that are remaining, is editing the node and deleting the node. Now we can view the node like this. Here we can do one more thing, like we can also have a dedicated scroll for more button in case our mouse scrolling gets failed. In that case we can just use this. Like here we'll be having a div, ref will be our loader ref, and class name will be py6 text center opacity 70. If it's loading, in that case it will be loading more ... If it has more, means it has next key ref. With that we can identify that it has more. In that case we'll just show a button will be btn small. On click we'll just, if next ref is there, we'll fetch new nodes, append will be true, and use key will be our next ref.current, and text will be scroll for more. If there is no longer any nodes, in that case we'll just show no more nodes. Now if we try to refresh our UI, we'll find that here it's showing load more and then no more nodes to load. Now we have done all the things for reading our nodes from our backend and show it inside our front end. Now let's work on the edit and delete functionality. For this, here we are going to be having two buttons for our edit and delete. Let's import these two buttons icons from Lucid React. Now we'll be requiring three icons. First will be edit, then trash for delete, and share for sharing our node. And when we are viewing the node, we should have the button, like here we'll be having the button for edit and delete. So here we have written our nodes. After this date, here we'll be having a class name of flex gap2, then we'll have one button for our edit. It will be like this. Here we are using btn excel, btn ghost, and btn circle, and then we'll have one more button for our delete. This time we'll just add text as error so that it gets the color as red. And now this is how it look. Now we need to add functionality to this button. When we click this, it should give us the option to edit or delete. First we need to create backend endpoints for this, then we'll be linking it with our front end. Now here in our backend we need to write the function for updating the user node. For that, we'll create a const update node function. We'll pass. It will be async and will pass request and response. we'll wrap it inside try catch. Then first we'll take the node ID from request.params and node and whether it's public or not from request.body. Then we'll get the current time from new date.toISO string. Then the share URL will be localhost/share/node ID. If we are sending is public to true from front end, else it will set to null. And here we'll start writing our command. This time it will be update command. We need to write the name of our table. It will be user nodes. Then the key, this time the key we are going to be targeting upon our node ID. So the key will be our node ID, and here will set update expression to set node will be node ID, last updated will be the last updated current time and whether it's public or not, and share URL. Here will be our expression value, like node will be the node that we are passing from request.body. Current time will be the time that we are creating using date.toISO string and whether it's public or not, and the share URL. And then we'll just return all the new values that we are creating and we'll get the result after we run dynamo client.send. Then we'll just return the response using res.json like node updated successfully and return all the results attribute. In case of error, we'll just console.log error on updating node, and then we'll just send response status 500 code in case we are failing to update the node. Now we need to also link this function with some route. Here inside our nodes route, we'll first import update node, and here it will be route to update the node, and here node ID was from request.params. So for that, here we'll be using router.host and it will be /node ID, means node ID is going to be our params. You will first use authenticate token and then we can just call update node. In this way it will work. Now we need to call this function from our front end. What we can do here, instead of writing separate function, we can reuse the function handle save node. Like here currently we are setting the method as post, but if it's node to edit, in that case the method will be put, else it will be post. Also here we need to do the change for our URL. This will be localhost 3000/node and the node to edit.node ID. This everything will be similar and everything will be similar. After we get the OK response, we'll close the model, we'll set the next key to null and next key ref current will be also set to null, and we'll try to load more and fetch new nodes. Let's try to save it, but we need to call this function after we complete our edit. So here inside our UI we need to link that so that we can edit our node. Let's build that UI for that. Here like this, we'll create one more const variable. This time it will be open model for edit. Here we will pass the node. We are going to be setting the node to edit the node that we have selected, and current node will be node.node, and whether it's public or not, we can get that from node.asPublic, or we'll set the default as false and set as model open to true so that we can show a pop-up. And again we need to link this with our edit button, like on click we'll be having an event, and first we'll just stop the event.propagation and then we'll just open our model for edit. Here we are going to be passing the node. For this specific node, the user is selected the edit button. Now if we try to edit this, here we are getting the option as edit node, and this is our node, and here it's showing as save changes. So let's try to change this node, like it's hello. Let's click on edit. Let's make it hi, how are you? Let's save the changes. Now here it's showing hi, how are you? It means that everything went correctly. This node came at the first because we just updated now. If we try to edit this, like make it this is our new node and make it public. Let's click on save changes. Now you can see that this is our new node ... So in this way edit is also working fine. Now let's work on the delete node function. For this we need to first write our delete node logic. Now for deleting the node, we'll create one more function. This will be delete node async request and response. First we'll use try catch, then we'll get the node ID from request.params, and here we'll start writing our command. It will be delete command, and we need to pass the table name and the key that will be our node ID. It's just simple as that. We don't need anything else. Then we'll just call await dynamo client.send command, and then we can simply add the response that node deleted successfully. In case of any error, we'll just send error in deleting node and return fail to delete node. Now we need to link this with our nodes route. It will be to delete specific node. Here we'll use router.delete node ID will be from params and then authenticate token, our auth middleware. Then here we need to first import delete node and we can call this function delete node. Now let's work on the UI for our delete node. Inside our nodes page, we already have a node to delete and set node to delete use state available. We are going to be using that. So after our close model, here we'll have one more function. It will be for to confirm before deleting. Name of the function will be confirm delete, and first if node to delete is true, in that case we'll just delete the node and we'll pass the specific node ID. It will be inside node to delete dot node ID and we'll set node to delete to null. And now before calling this confirm delete function, we need to also show a confirm dialog that are you sure you want to delete this node. For this we'll be having one more UI. Here it will be very similar. Like when we click on the trash icon, here first we'll disable the propagation and we'll set node to delete the specific node that we are setting to delete. Now what will happen when we call set node to delete, it means that the node that we are passing will be stored inside node to delete, and now we'll be having if node to delete is there, we'll just call this delete node function and pass node to delete and node ID. So now we need to write the delete node function. We need to write it above this because we need to call it here. So we should write delete node function here. So here we'll just call a delete node function will pass async, and we want that node ID should be passed through this function. First we'll be using try catch and then we'll send response to our backend. It will be localhost 3000/node/node ID. Like we have written, the node ID is going to be inside our params and the method is going to be delete as we have mentioned here. And then we'll pass the authorization. It will be bearer auth user.access_token. And then if response is okay, in that case we'll just set the next key to null because we don't need to load the newer items. Instead we need to just fetch the data. We'll just set next keyref.current is equal to null and has more will be to true, and we want to refresh the data. We'll just call fetch node again and pass append and use key, pass append to false, use key to null, and in case of error we'll just print console, and in case of error we'll just print error in deleting node. Now we have linked this function, but we are not showing the delete confirmation UI. Like here, when we click this icon, it will set the node to delete, but here we are not showing any deletion confirmation UI. Let's do that deletion confirmation UI. Here above the node to view, we can write the function. Here first, we'll check if node to delete is there. In that case, we'll just render a div of class name model and model open. It will make it look like pop-up, and then we'll have a class name of model box. We'll have an h3 of font bold and text large. The text will be confirm deletion and some paragraph that are you sure you want to delete this node. And then we'll be having our buttons inside model action. First will be our cancel button, and if user clicks on cancel, then we'll just set node to delete to null. We want to remove that node from our node to delete variable, and then we'll have a delete button. When we click on this, we'll just show the confirm delete option. Means here when we try to click on delete, it's showing us the confirm deletion option. If we click on cancel, it just cancel the delete option. And if we try to click on delete here, let's also check the network logs. Like if we click on delete, here our node got deleted. Like as you can see, we got the response, node deleted successfully, and it also fetched for the new nodes. First 12 nodes have been fetched. And when we scroll down, it just called the another node. Our last node was this, and next key is null because we don't have any other nodes, so it's showing us no more nodes. Now we have done everything, starting from creating, reading, updating, and deleting each node. But one thing we can do more exciting, like we are having the sharing option. Like as you can see, this node is public. It means that anyone from outside can access this node using URL. For having that, we need to write one more logic. We are also storing whether it's public or not and last updated, as well as the save time and the share URL. In case it's public, we can use this if user visit this URL. In that case, we can just show the nodes that we are sharing. So let's do that. So for this, first we need to read the node that's shareable. For that, we need to write one more route. This will be to read our shareable node. For this, we don't want the user to be authenticated. Anyone can read this node without being authenticated. First, we need to write the logic inside our backend. You will be creating a const function get shared node. It will be an async function, will pass request and response, will use try catch. First we'll get the node id from request.params, and then we'll create a command variable. This time we'll be calling the query command, will pass the table name, our key expression where node id will be equal to the node id that we are passing. Filter expression, here we'll be also passing whether it's public or not. For this expression attribute values, first we'll pass the node ID as the node ID that we're receiving from params, and whether it's public or not, it should be always true. Means it's public, then anyone can access that without being authenticated, and then we'll just load the result by calling dynamo client.send our command. If result.items is null or undefined or length is equal to 0, in that case we'll return status 404 and JSON that shared node is not found or not public, else we'll return that item. In case of catch, we'll just do console error in fetching shared node and add the status fail to fetch the shared node. Now we need to call this. Now we need to have some routes to call this. Inside our nodes route, we need to first import get shared node, and now we need to write the route to load the shared node, no or needed. So here we'll just use router.get/shared/node id. This node id is the params, and we'll just call shared node. Here we are not calling this authenticate token middleware because anyone can access without being authenticated. Now we need to call this endpoint from our front end, but before that we need to do some big changes. Like currently our application is working like a single page application, but we need to make it somewhat like routes specific. For this we'll be requiring some additional packages like React Router DOM. So for adding this, we need to just open the terminal and type npm add React Router DOM. And now inside our app.jsx, we need to import browser router as router from React Router DOM. We also need to import route and routes. Now here we need to write, first we'll be wrapping this using our router, and then inside router we are going to be having routes, and then we'll have route inside routes. Like first route will be for part shared :node id, and our second route will be for part, this will be for root part, and our element will be, so you need to just add an empty div. We need to just add an empty div, and we need to also wrap it in curly braces like this and just close the route. Now it's okay that for root route we'll just show it as we are doing, and for shared/node we'll have one more component for our shared page to show the shared node. Let's write that component. This component will be shared page node.jsx. You will simply use rfce. Now from this React function we'll be using use effect and use state. Will be also requiring use params from React Router DOM. We'll be also using use params from React Router DOM, as we are going to be reading the node ID from params. For that reason, like inside the function, we'll have node ID that we are going to be reading from params, then node and set node, then loading and set loading, and error and set error. Before fetching this page, first we want to read the node from our backend and then display. For that, we'll just use effect so that we can fetch our backend immediately when user opens this page. Here we are creating a const fetch shared node function. Here we'll use try catch. Finally, first we'll send a fetch request to our localhost 3000 nodes shared and the node ID. This is the backend logic that we have written. And then if response is not okay, we'll just add a error that node not found or not public. Else we'll get the data from response.json and we'll store that in data variable and we'll set node to data.node. In case of any error, we'll just set error to as error.message. Else in case of finally, we can just and the set loading to false. And now we need to also call this function. So we will be calling this function, and for dependency will be only after we get the node ID, and this node ID we are going to be getting from the params. Now this function will get called and it will try to load the node data when we open this page. So here in case of loading, we can just show a loading indicator, like we can show the same thing that we are using here. Just copy here, and if it's loading, we'll just return this bounce loader. But for this we need to import bounce loader like this, copy and paste. If we are having any error, in that case we'll return some paragraph and text error, the error that we are getting. Else we'll return first the container that we are having. This one will be very similar to our root layout, this one, and then we'll just have a navbar or and class name of flex similar to the navbar that we're having. Then we'll just create a card body, justify center. Here first we'll add the text as shared node and class name will be badge success in public. Here we need to display our node, and then we'll have some card actions like last updated. And here for our shared route, we'll be using the element as shared page node that we have created, and now we can save it. Now here we have all our nodes, and it's also loading extra nodes that we have. If we try to access some shared node, let's copy this URL and try to open this. Here it is showing us the node that this is our second node. Here node's logo is not coming. Let's try to refresh. So it is coming from shared nodes.png. So we need to define the path. It will be /. Now let's try to refresh. Here we are getting the nodes logo and our shared node that we have shared. Now let's make this node as shareable. Now this node is shareable. Let's try to refresh this from here. This was the URL. Let's try to copy this URL and now let's paste this. Here we are getting the node. Like if we try to edit any values, we'll find that it is showing that node not found or not public. One thing we can do, like we can show the shareable URL inside here only directly so that the user can copy and share with others. Let's do this change. Like inside our model that we have inside in our notes page, like when we view the node, here node to view, whether it's public or not, here above the close button we can have the share copy link icon. Here we'll be having node to view dot as public and node to view as share URL. In that case, we'll just create a div of margin top 4, padding 3, background best 200 and rounded LG, some paragraph that this is our share URL, and then we'll just add a gap of 2 and input text that will be read only, and then we'll have a button for copying. But for this we need to also write a function to copy our URL. For this we can just write the function here, like if here we are going to be creating the function copy share URL. It will be async. We need to pass our node. If node has share URL, that means it's public. In that case only we'll start try-catch. First we'll use navigator.clipboard.write text. This will copy the text that we have inside node.share URL and will alert the user that share URL have been copied. And in case of any error, we'll just print it's an error, and we'll also alert that we just failed to copy. And now we'll call this function. When we click on this copy button, like when we click on this, we'll use on click and we'll call this function copy share URL. So here inside the copy URL, we need to also pass the node, otherwise we'll not be able to copy. Our node will be inside the node to view, so it will be inside node to view. Now our copy share URL was not working because we have not passed the node that we need to pass, like this function except to pass the node, but we are not passing that. Our node will be inside node to view, just this, and inside copy share URL we are passing the node, and from node we are just writing the share URL from the node. So now it's expected that it should work. Now let's try to copy. Here we are getting the pop-up that share URL has been copied. Now we can just visit this link and it's showing us the note that we have shared. How are you? This was the note. Now sharing is also working. Now in some case, now if somebody just types some random keyword, in that case it's just showing like this, not found or not public. We can just do some more changes to make it more better. Like we can copy this same UI here and paste it here, but this time we'll not have this last updated or inside this card body. We can simply pass this paragraph. Now it's showing it something like this, note not found or not public. We can also make the text as center and font bold like this. Now it's perfect. We have successfully completed our notes application. Here we can either create, read, update, delete, and also share note with others so that they can access the note without any authentication. So this was how we built a scalable notes application using React and Node.js